We got a question that came in of someone who asked, my husband had an affair and he got the other woman pregnant. How does that affect the length of time that the affair might last? Does that make limerence last longer? Because they are going to have a child together. How does that affect things? And ultimately, how does that affect the ability for me to save my marriage? Well, here's the answer. It does make it more difficult when the spouse who's had an affair has a child with the other person. So whether it's your spouse is the woman and they had an affair with a man and they got pregnant and they're now having that other man's child, or whether it's your husband who had an affair with another woman and now that other woman is having a child. Here's what it means. The limerence isn't necessarily going to last longer. The way those feelings that come for the affair partner they don't necessarily drag out or stay longer than a normal limerent relationship because of the pregnancy and because of the child. However, that relationship might last longer, them staying in a relationship with that person, even if those limerence feelings are gone, because there is that feeling of, I owe this person something because of this consequence, because of what has happened as a result of our relationship. There is something that I owe to them. Now, if you are the standing spouse, here's some things to consider. We have worked with many, many marriages where this has been the case, whether it is the wife of the marriage that's being saved is pregnant with the other man's child, or whether it's the husband of the marriage that's trying to be saved and they got another woman pregnant with a child. We have seen this situation and we have worked with it many times. And even as far to say that those marriages have been saved, many of those marriages have been saved, and they have worked it out to where that child that was the product of the affair is still taken care of, is still being raised in a great way. There's still co-parenting going on. But there's some things that have to happen before your marriage can get to that point. If your spouse is in this situation where they are having a child with their affair partner, then you need to consider what things are going through your spouse's mind. One of the main things that was probably going through the mind of your spouse is, I have been a part of what is happening here, and therefore there's something that I owe to my affair partner. Whether it's my time, whether it's child support, whether it's any kind of support, because now there is a child coming from this. The worst thing that a spouse who is trying to save the marriage in this kind of situation can do is to tell their spouse who's in the affair, you aren't allowed to be a part of that child's life. As the spouse wanting to save the marriage and the spouse who's not in the affair and is wanting so desperately to get your spouse back, we can understand why someone would say that, because there's that fear of, if you stay in that child's life, then you are going to fall back in love with that person. But the truth of it is, the child didn't do anything wrong. The two people that engaged in this affair and that the child was a result of, they made some mistakes, but the truth of the matter is there's still a child involved, and every child needs two parents. And when a child doesn't do anything wrong, you have to take that into consideration. So the fact that your spouse may be wanting to do the right thing in one sense of, I need to be a part of this child's life, I need to be a good father or be a good mother, I feel responsible for that because part of what I did led to this. You need to respect that and understand where your spouse is coming from. It's not necessarily that they want to continue the affair or even be with that other person. But if they feel like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and the spouse standing for the marriage is making it harder and is trying to make them make even more decisions of not being a part of the child's life, leaving the affair, not having any contact, not supporting the child at all, then it's only going to probably lead the person who's had the affair to choosing to stay in the relationship where the child is, because they feel such a large amount of responsibility for it. So, is your marriage still able to be saved? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to be harder? Yes, because there is a big obstacle involved, and that obstacle is this other child. The best thing that the standing spouse can do in this situation is do what they can to help love that child. If your spouse is the husband and it's the other woman who's gotten pregnant and had a child, and letting your spouse know, I forgive you, I'm here for you, let's together as a team be a part of this and be a part of that child's life. Because the child didn't do anything wrong. Yes, there's going to need to be boundaries set. Yes, there's going to need to be amazing amount of trust and commitment, but you work towards that. You don't demand all of these things up front from your spouse who's wanting to come back to the marriage. It's a process you work on and you do it together. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what if it's my wife who's gotten pregnant by the other man? We have seen marriages where that has been the case, and the two people, the wife who had the affair and then the standing spouse, they decide we are going to raise this child together and love it just as our own. And we are not going to hide the fact that he or she has another father, but I'm going to be a father to it too. And we are going to practice grace and mercy, and we are going to see this child grow up in a happy and healthy way. Now, some of you might be thinking, all of that sounds great, but what do I do if my spouse is not wanting to come back right now? You take it one step at a time. It doesn't change any of the things that we teach you. Work on your pies. Work on becoming a safe place for your spouse. Understand the things that are going on in their mind, the responsibility they feel, the guilt that they probably feel. And once you start empathizing with your spouse about why they do the things they do, why they're wanting to stay in that situation that they're in, it'll pivot the way that you communicate with your spouse. Because as long as you view your spouse as the idiot, or as the person doing the horrible thing, or as the man who knocked up another woman and isn't coming back to me, as long as you use that negative phraseology, and as long as you hate that child or have negative feelings towards that child that's going to be born or towards that other woman, it's going to affect the way that you talk to your spouse about it. It's going to affect the whole way that you think about that situation. So soften yourself, soften the way that you think about things, soften the way that you communicate with your spouse. And if you can, let your spouse know, I understand that you feel responsible for this and that you want to be a father to this child, and I support you. Now, you're not saying, I support you going and marrying the other woman to be a father to that child. You're saying, I support that you want to do that, and I think you're doing the right thing, and I am willing to be a sounding board for you, to listen to you when things are going bad, to hear you when things are hard, but I'm also willing to stand beside you and to help that child as well. And ultimately, my goal is for you to come back to the marriage. I would love for us to save this and work it out. And I promise you, I'm not going to hold it against you that you had another child with this person. I'm not going to hold it against you. I'm not going to let it always come up in our conversations and use it as something to control you or to manipulate you. I understand that you did something that resulted in this, and it was not a good thing. It was not the right thing to do, but this is what's happening right now, and this is what we're going to do about it going forward. And I'm here to support you, and in any way I can, I'm here to be here as a support system for us helping to raise this child, even as a stepchild for me. I'm willing to do that. If you can get to the point where you're compassionate enough, where you are graceful enough, where you're merciful enough, where you are forgiving enough, then that is the best thing that you can do in moving forward when your spouse has had an affair and they are now having a child with their affair partner. There's still hope. There's always hope. Keep doing your pies. Keep doing the things you know to do. Keep working on saving your marriage.